Hey, what's going on, guys? We're back with the next part of our Learning C# tutorial series, and the two things I said I was going to cover, we haven't covered yet. One of them is our tutorial level, where we just do a routine for the tutorial, which I think it's easy enough, and it's kind of boring, to be quite honest. So instead, what we're going to do in this, we'll do the tutorial next. But in this tutorial, what we're going to do is talk about class serialization, and that is serializing a class to a string, more specifically an XML type string, and then this can be loaded up and applied to a generic class. Now, there are ways of doing this where we can do create an XML serializer, create a string writer, give the string writer or the serializer of type whatever, and then serialize it, which I think it's a lot of wasted time. And when I try and make code, I try to make it as efficient as possible. And one way to do that is using a technique called generics. And generics, it's basically an uppercase T, where T is a certain type or class. So we'll go ahead and create a new code file in our utilities. If I have to turn my keyboard on first, hold on. in our utilities folder, and we're going to call it XML manager. Okay, and we need to import using system.io, I know is one of them. .xml.serialization is another one. And I think that's it. If we need more, we'll go ahead and import them when we're ready to. But we'll make a new public static class XML manager, not inheriting from anything. And you've noticed we made them static, so we cannot create an object reference. We wouldn't need to create an object reference. We can just reference the static methods through any other script. And first we'll do the saving one because it's a little bit simpler. We're going to do a public static string save. So this will take in a class and its data and output its string value, or its serialized string value. Now, normally you would see parentheses after a method. However, for generics, we need to put a what are these called? Like left carets? I don't know. This symbol T, the end of that symbol, and then we're gonna plug in this parentheses here, taking in type T data. And like I said, all you need to know is that T is a generic class. And I think the reason this is the way it is because we need to. Okay, not all code pass return a value. Never mind. I'm hoping we forgot, or we didn't forget to include anything. So we're going to create a new XML serializer. Here we go, and we'll just call them XML equals a new XML serializer, and then it's taking in a system.type. And so what we can do is just type of T, which was passed in as not a parameter, but as the type. Okay, so now this XML serializer is ready to serialize data of type T, and that can be any class. It can be, we're going to use it for the weapon, but it can be for save data. It can be for audio data. Like for instance, when we did our save manager, where is that? Here. We just created a new player preference for every single mission. If we want to do, we can create a single string or single player pref with all the string data, but we don't need to do that. We already set up an efficient system that way, so we're going to go ahead and just use this for our weapon system right now until we think of a better way or another way of using it. Next, we need to make a string writer, and we're going to call him write equals a new string writer, and then that's all you need to do for him. Next, we'll do xml.serialize, passing in that write stream, and then the object will be the data parameter that we passed in, which is the class data. Next, all we have to do is return write.toString. So you're probably thinking, well, we didn't really do anything to write. We just created a new string writer. We do the XML serialize, and then we just return the write. What this function does is it takes the string writer and it writes data to the writer. If you're unfamiliar with, we haven't talked about a lot of IO functionality. We've been mostly game programming, but how a string writer works is that it'll write to a file at runtime, and so this serialize method will go ahead and flush data, or not flush isn't the right word. It'll put data into that string writer, and then once it's done serializing, we can output that write.toString. And that's it. That's for that function. I know I'm doing a huge amount of explanation for a small amount of code. This is something that I think is pretty cool. So we're going to go ahead and make our load function now. So this is going to be return type of t. So it's a generic. We can get any class back from this. We're going to call it load from type t, passing in the string of XML string. So this will be, once we get the XML string that's been serialized, we can plug it into this method and output the class type. So it's very powerful. We can, instead of sending object data, we can send it as string data. This is useful for, working on Sword Art Online. When you have to serialize class data, like your position, you can't send an object with saying, here's a clumped class of position data where he's facing, all this other stuff. You need to serialize that data some way into, whether it be a string or a byte array or numbers, something along those lines, where you can package that information into a packet and send it off to the server. You can't just send the object, and that's where XML serialization comes in, and it's super handy. Next thing we need to do is t here is a type, not just a class. So we want to be able to return a class type. And the difference between a type and a class, it's not a big importance right now, but we're just going to have to make sure that we put where t inherits from or is a class. Okay. Now another concept we're going to talk about is a try-catch block. And what this does is there's a certain times where somewhere something can fail, and we don't want the client to get that exception. We don't want the client to get the error. So in catch, we'll do is if we get an error, we receive the error in the code, and then we can handle information how we want to do it. So even if we get an error, the client will only see what we want to see. And it's simple. We just do a try like that, and then a catch exception, and we'll call them E. And since the catch is easier, we'll go ahead and do this first. We're just going to do a we need an import system. I forgot about that guy. We'll do a debug, or we also need to import Unity engine. We'll do debug.log, or rather log error e.toString. So we're just going to display an error to the console about this error, and then we're just going to go ahead and return null. So that would happen, let's say, if we pass in a string that isn't serialized, like it doesn't match. Let's say we serialize the weapon class, and then we try and load it into a audio class. It won't be able to properly deserialize it. It'll catch an error. So we're gonna have to do this, basically this, but we're gonna do it backwards. So first thing we want is a string, reader this time, and we're gonna call them outstream. And then this time we are going to initialize it and pass in that string of XML string. So that's the string it's going to read. It doesn't do anything. That's the string it's going to read. It hasn't read yet. Then we're going to make an XML serializer. Call it XML equals a new XML serializer of type of passing in that generic t, which has to be a class. So now that serializer is ready to serialize or deserialize that class. And what we're going to do is a simple return the t casted. So whatever, I'll explain it in a minute. We'll do xml.deserialize outstream. So first we'll talk about the right side here. It's going to deserialize the outstream. And so what this will do is it'll force the string reader to read through this text and deserialize it into an object class. However, even though it is set up in the format of that class, we still need to cast it back to that class, which is of type T, and then return it before we can, if we just do return xml.deserialize, it'll return an object, and we want that specific class to be returned. Alright, so I'm going to stop the video here, and then in the next video we will talk about actually using this class to serialize our weapon data.